Hello, I'm Brenda Allison, a bookseller at Barnes& Noble. Today, I am very excited to be in conversation with Erin O. White. Erin is an essayist and the author of a memoir, and we are here to talk about her debut novel, Like Family. Like Family is a story of belonging, middle age, desire, love, and community. It's also the Barnes& Noble Book Club selection for November and available in stores now. It's funny and touching, and I'm overjoyed to discuss it with her today. Erin, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Brenda. It's so nice to be here talking with you.
We're going to try and have a spoiler-free conversation today, so let's get underway. Like Family is the story of three couples in the middle of their lives in a small town upstate, but it's about so much more. Can you give us a synopsis of the novel?
Sure. In this novel, as you said, takes place in a fictional town in upstate New York, and it's about three families. And these families are connected by bonds of friendship and also of biological family. The first family is a lesbian couple who live on a farm, sort of like a gentleman farm, although it's more of a gentlewoman farm, really, outside the town. They have four children. The second couple is a straight couple who have one child. His name is Luca. And then the third couple is another lesbian couple who own a artisan, sort of viral artisan pottery company, and have twin children. And then the ties between the family are both sort of like very, very relatable and understandable to readers, but also kind of complex to describe.
Right.
Which is kind of funny. Ruth and Wynn are the lesbian couple who have the Gentlewoman Farm. Ruth is best friends with Caroline, and her husband is Mike. They have the one child, Luca. Mike and then the other couple, Toby and Evie, Toby is Mike's cousin. And their children were actually conceived with sperm that was donated by Mike. So it is kind of a family sort of like jumble of people in a way that I created to be sort of very much like people's real lives, right? Really interconnected with a bunch of people in your community and in your family. So what happens essentially in the book, or to give a synopsis, is it's ultimately the story of what happens to them in this moment of middle age when they all thought they had everything they wanted, and then suddenly they want a whole bunch of new things. And those new desires are set in motion when someone in their community dies. And all these families have a different reaction or a different experience of that death. But what it does is puts them all in a position where they're examining some of the choices that they've made and some of the things they might want to change. And they're examining their relationships with each other, which is really setting in motion some tension between them and really just sort of creating friction in what felt to them like a very frictionless existence.
That is a great synopsis. I will also say at the beginning of the book, there's a little chart that shows who goes with which family, which was helpful for me when I first started the book. But like after a very short amount, I knew who went with who. So
yes.
Yes. And like you said, it is very much akin to how we live our real lives. Like, oh, how do you know these people? Well, we met at a party one time, and it's very much akin to how we live our real lives. I would love to talk, Erin, about how did this novel reveal itself to you? This is your debut novel here in middle life. So talk about like, how did you come up with it? How did it reveal to you?
Well, it has a sort of an interesting, I mean, all novels have an interesting origin story, but
yes.
I was taking a walk with Curtis Sittenfeld, who I'm sure people who are listening to this podcast will know exactly who she is.
Prep is one of my all-time faves, so yes.
I know. And I said to her, we were talking about our writing projects, which we often do, and I said, I have this idea for a short story about a couples therapist in a small town and three couples that see the same therapist, and the way that sort of just like creates some kind of drama of some kind. And Curtis was like, oh my God, it's a novel. And of course, when Curtis Sittenfeld says to you, oh my God, it's a novel, you listen, right? So I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a go. So I gave it a go, and I wrote about 150 pages, and I gave it to Curtis. And she was like, this is amazing, but I think you should take the couples therapist out of it.
Interesting.
I was like, oh, but that was the whole point of the book. And she's like, actually, I don't think it is the point anymore. And that was such an interesting experience in kind of revision and what revision really is, which is
Hmm.
actually to really rethink a book multiple times over the course of its life. And she was totally right. There is a therapist in the book
There's more than
still.
one, actually, but yes.
That's true. There are two therapists. Um, and and so, but she doesn't have a point of view anymore.
Hmm.
And also, the story doesn't revolve around her at all.
Hmm.
So that's sort of how it was born. It had a slightly different form, but at its heart, it was about sort of the same thing, which is this kind of like interconnectedness between couples in middle age and how lives can really just be joined in so many intimate ways. Even as you age and get married and you think your life becomes about your nuclear family, it really is so much about the people around you.
Oh, it's so interesting talking about revision. I would love to talk a little bit about craft here. The book now, in its published form, is the chapters change perspectives on different characters. Can you talk a little bit about and it also jumps in time, and you'll see the characters in the past and some of the decisions they made in the past. Did you always plan to write it this way with the jumping in time and character perspective? Talk a little bit about that.
That is such an interesting question. I love thinking about that. I think there was a time when I had given most of the novel to Ruth, who
Mm-hmm.
is one of the main characters. There are three points of view in the book. One is Ruth,
Mm-hmm.
one is Caroline, and one is Toby. So there's a
Yeah.
point of view from each of these three families. There was a time also when Sitta, who is
Oh.
the teenage daughter, had a point of view, and that left not that long ago, actually.
Huh.
So I knew that I wanted to do a multi point of view story because I do think it is the way to create a sense of narrative abundance, which is what I
Oh.
wanted to do in terms of like, this is a messy, beautiful group of people who all have their different perspectives on things. So I wanted like characters to be able to get into an argument and then
Mm-hmm.
have them both talking about it with other people. Because, of course, that's really what we do when we have these close knit relationships, right? We talk about it with the people and then we go to other people in the constellation. And I wanted to sort of show that. I wanted to sort of show what endured in people's personalities and tendencies across relationships, and also what was specific to each one, like what's specific in this marriage for this person, what's specific in this familial relationship with this other person, and to show that. And really, I could only do that by changing point of view, and it was a lot of fun to do that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to read too, because you would
Oh,
see an
good.
argument in one section and then you would see someone else's interpretation or like what they took personally, what it was really about for them. Um, so I would love to start. You kind of hinted at this earlier. Part of what the book is about is what does life look like when you have everything you ever thought you wanted. The epigraph is from the brilliant Laurie Colwin, and she talks about woe to those who get what they desire. Um, I want to discuss this idea of getting to middle age, getting everything you thought you wanted, and being like, oh, wait.
Right? I know it's real.
Yes,
The
very
struggle is
real.
real. The struggle is real. I like to sort of think. I like to think of the book as a coming of middle age novel because I
Yes,
think
yes.
really it's about just this very beginning of this time when you realize that you've been working towards this particular thing, and you've been working hard,
And
right?
now what?
And then you realize you've got, if you're lucky, so much time
Mm-hmm.
still and so many things to figure out. And you haven't stopped experiencing the essential human feeling of wanting. And life is unfolding around you, and you're still wanting things, and you're wanting things to change, and you're having enormous feelings. And yet, your life is pretty tightly woven. And so it's like you have made specific choices that you've gotten you to a particular place. Where will I live? What will I do? Who will I love? Those questions are kind of getting answered at that point, or they have been answered. And so it can feel like there's a smaller space in which to want or to do, but and that is true and isn't true in many ways. But that's
Yeah.
kind of what I wanted to show in the novel is that even inside this space that feels pretty woven. These people who have their people for sure, they still are looking out and trying to figure out what their life is going to be. And it's pretty messy in the beginning of middle age. Like I wrote this novel about people who are about 10 years younger than I am.
Mhm.
And I really remember the time as so beautiful, but and so interesting, but also pretty agitating, right? There was a lot of jealousy. There was a lot of what if I'd made these other choices that this person right next to me made. But in this 10-year time, I feel like I understand so much more that life comes for everybody,
Yo, indeed.
everybody, right? And but now I have so much more compassion and more grace, and I wanted to really give that to my characters. I wanted to give them a certain amount of confidence. I wanted them to really love each other. I wanted them to get through it because they will.
Absolutely. And you know that now with the hindsight, right? I recently interviewed Jen Hatmaker for the podcast about
Oh, sure, yeah.
her memoir, and she said basically what you said was just like life comes for everyone, and if it hasn't yet, you just haven't lived long enough, which is just about
Really
right.
true. Yeah, it's really true.
Um, I want to talk about there's so much here, and the characters. Do we want a do-over for our lives, or do we just want what we want, and can we find it in our present life?
Yeah, that is such an interesting question, isn't it? I think, it is a question of do we want to do over is so, of course, and part of middle age is oftentimes getting to the point where you don't, of course, you don't want to do over because you have done a bunch of things that have been so meaningful. You may have created other human beings that you would never want to be without, right? Um, but there is for some people, and I think this is what my main character, Ruth, is grappling with in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
There is for some people a desire to somehow collect all the people that you've loved in your past and somehow bring them with you.
Mm,
And that is impossible, right? If it really just is. And yet that's a part one of the bittersweet and lost parts of middle age is you want to kind of bring everybody forward with you. And for so many reasons you can't. And I think that more and so I think that there's that looking back and wishing for that, and there's also the wanting of the future, but it is that particular moment when you really are grappling with that reality of like my past exists in a particular way and in a particular place, and I can't have it all the time.
absolutely. And can you tell us about this idea, both for the characters, and you mentioned the three main perspectives, Toby, Ruth, Caroline, grappling with like what do we hold on to and what do we let go of?
And how they are all how they are all dealing with that.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I mean it's interesting. I think it's interesting because I think I have one so Ruth is really wanted to let go of her past, and now she had up until the moment of the
Until
beginning of
it
the book,
shows up on her
until
doorstep.
it shows up on her doorstep, and then she's like, whoa, maybe I shouldn't have done this. And
Mhm.
that is such a common feeling, right? It was sort of like she had this idea that there was ample time, as it's so easy to feel in early middle age, that to get around to reckoning with the ghosts of the past. And
Mm,
suddenly, what happens at the beginning of the book is she has no more time. She has actually lost the time to do what she needed to do. And
mhm,
so she has to grapple with that, which is interesting. And then one of my other characters, Toby, is realizing that she has a desire that she couldn't have maybe even put into words or articulated through much of her life, maybe all of her life, but it
mhm,
was very real. And she realizes that she's come to a moment where she can um, actualize that desire, where she can actually make it happen for herself, and that she has to do some grappling with what it would do to her current life and what it would do to her marriage and what it would but it's sort of like she's been sort of tending a little flame
mhm,
and all along in her life, and now she's finally in a place where she can kind of let it go, let it really burn. And Ruth is sort of the opposite. She's been trying to extinguish this thing that has been in her past, and she's also has a fire now, right? And hers is one that she has to figure out how they both have to figure out how to live with it. But it is a
mhm.
role of the past playing a slightly different role in both of their lives.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about the different familial and friendship relationships in the novel. Um, I want to talk about parents and children. Caroline, the character of Caroline, her mother dies when she's very young. The character of Mike, he was essentially an orphan, but he's very tied to Toby and her mother, who essentially raised him. And then, Caroline and Luca, Ruth and Sita. I want to talk about the roles of parents and children, how they play out as the child in us or children, and how they play out as the parent in us. Can you talk about some of those ideas?
Sure. It was really fun to give these families different, of course, different children, and to so that I could sort of explore all these different types of relationships we have with our children and with our parents. And it was interesting for me to then to think about their origins,
Mm-hmm.
and why that would make them make the choices that they had. Now, like for example, Ruth, whose mother died when she was young, she becomes pregnant unexpectedly in her early 20s. And I feel like the decision to have the child is so wrapped up in her own
Yeah.
loss of her mother. And that was really an interesting thing for me to explore narratively on the page, just to really think about the reasons why she would want to do this particular thing. And then she goes on to have three more children. And I was also interested in the particularities of her relationship with her teenage daughter, with
Mm-hmm.
whom she'd had on her own and had raised for a short amount of time, but a really consequential amount of time by herself.
Mm-hmm.
So I like sort of thinking about, I always like to think about the way that our mothers inform our experience of parenting. Um, and then I wanted to put Mike in a situation where he didn't have parents, um, or whose parents couldn't care for him in the way that he needed to be cared for, because I wanted to push him into a more traditionally sibling relationship with this woman, Toby, who is his cousin,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm really interested by the idea of people who recreate and create in new ways parental relationships and
Mm-hmm.
also sibling relationships. And I wanted to show how that would play out into middle age, and to show him as such a deeply loyal person to these people who had done this really extraordinary thing for and with him. Um, and then I also wanted to show how that affected his relationship with his son, as his son was getting older, and his wife wanted to be more. He wanted to worry about him
Oh,
essentially a little bit
yeah.
more than Mike wanted to worry about him. And I wanted to show the reasons why that would be true, right? That
Mm-hmm.
Mike wasn't going to get into the particularities of Luca's loneliness or his small child problems, where because his childhood had been very, very difficult, and that they had to navigate that as a couple and try to show each other that they both loved that child, um, in very different but
Absolutely.
beautiful ways.
Yeah, and I want to play off talking about how you navigate things as a couple, because spouse and partner relationships are also at the center of what's happening in like family. Um, I want to talk about, there's so much to talk about here, but this idea that your, which is a very modern American idea, that your partner will fulfill all the needs you have, and how that plays out in life.
Or doesn't play out, right?
What? Absolutely not well. Absolutely.
Spoiler alert, not a great strategy.
It's not.
It's not a great strategy. It is so interesting, isn't it?
Right.
And I do think we're coming to a place where people are talking a little bit more about it, but honestly, in many
Absolutely.
ways, barely scratching the surface of what I think is um, such a fundamental part of women's middle age, women's lives, but particularly
Yeah.
middle age, is their really vital relationships with their friends,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
how much we depend on our connections with other people outside of our family, honestly, to make us better members of our families
Absolutely.
and better spouses for sure. I mean, I do think that the time I spend, and it's a lot of time, talking
Mhm.
about my kids and my marriage with my friends, it really makes it makes me return to my family in a much different way. Now, of course, the trick there is, and this isn't always easy, is to find a friend who really wants the best for you and who, and who believes in you, right? And so that
Yep.
when you come to them and you're flagging a little bit, they can, get you going again, right?
Right.
You're worried about this and they can say, oh, she isn't, your daughter she's incredible. It's going to be fine. You really need a friend who can, especially at middle age, keep you going.
Yeah. And like validate your feelings. Like there's a scene
Totally.
in the book, and I can't remember which character it is, who's like, I just wanted to be validated. I just wanted to
Yeah,
hear, like, yes, I understand why you are concerned about that. And like that balance in friendship and in relationship of any kind of like, hey, I just want to be heard and it's gonna be okay.
totally. Right.
Right. Right.
Right. Which is why when one of the friendships in the book starts to experience some tension, significant tension, they have a
Yes.
pretty big argument. It's very destabilizing for these two characters. They have had a big loss in the time when they're not speaking to each other. And it's really upsetting. And I just wanted to show that to not have your best friend in your life every day would be a true loss for someone.
And it's not something we talk about a ton. We talk about
Right.
divorce, we talk about a breakup, but we don't talk that much in real life or in fiction about like
Right.
a friend breakup, which is
Right.
devastating. And no one
Right.
knows how to handle it. And especially when you're in a tight knit group and people hang out with each other and you're like, well, who do we
Exactly.
invite?
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
And I also, one of the things that I wanted to explore was this idea that these two women are best friends, but their families are also so close, and their children are close. And for one of the women, Caroline, who has these worries about her son being folded into that large family is one of the most important parts of Caroline's life. And so the idea that she would lose that for her kid is really devastating to her.
Yeah, there's a whole scene where Caroline is like, oh, but if we have a falling out or you and your spouse have a falling out, like what happens to my life? And she imagines
Right.
like we go over on Sunday, we eat dinner, and this is like they aren't our family, which is something I want to talk about, but they are our lives. And then what happens?
That's right.
Right. And I mean, I will tell you, I live in a community, a small community like that. And my best friend and I, our teenage daughters had a fight about a week ago. And it was a whole thing. Like
of course.
I was
of
like,
course.
Her husband was like, do we have plans for Halloween now? Because, oh, what happens? Because that is it. We're so
it's real. Oh, I know.
It is very real.
It's
very
real.
much identified with that scene, I will tell you, because it just happened at my house. So very real.
It's real. I feel you, Brenda. I do.
It worked out. Everything's fine.
Okay, good. I know.
Yeah,
I know.
they're 12,
sure
so
you're gonna figure it out. Yeah, I get it.
Exactly. But I also want to talk about there's also this part where like Caroline wants to like gossip with her husband, and he is like having none of it. He's just like, oh, interesting. And she wants to call her best friend and like really talk about things, and you can have a whole conversation with another woman sometimes that's nothing but I know, right, dude, I know. I want you to explore how that felt writing that kind of relationship. And that,
I mean, it really just flows onto the page, right? Because we all have
right,
we all have experience. I mean, you do have particular friends or a sister or a mother, or you do have people in your life with whom you can really just sit and fill the air. And if anyone were to walk into the room and hear you talking, they would not even, they would just be like, what is even going on here? This is the most boring thing I've ever heard. And I just think that I think it's rare that a spouse relationship, but I could be wrong, is super chatty and sort of like meandering in that way, especially in middle age when you just don't have a lot of time for meandering. But that is off. I do I did write those scenes and they came to me pretty easily just because I had a lot of experience. I mean, one of the scenes I wrote is very actually derivative of my life with my wife, in which would she would often come into the room when I'd be gossiping with a friend and then not know at all who we were talking about. And then we would spend like 5 minutes trying to get her to remember who it was we were referring to. And then she'd be like, oh. And then she would just walk out of the room. Like, and not really wanting to know what the gossip was. And she
You're
would
like,
never
don't you have questions? Don't you want to talk about this?
Yeah. And she would, from year to year, she wouldn't even remember the same, it would be the same people. And we'd be like, remember? Remember? Right. And she'd be like, no, I don't remember. So we're all programmed differently. It's just great to find people who are programmed like you.
Right. Aren't we so lucky when we find it?
We are. We're so lucky.
Absolutely. You talked a little bit earlier about this theme in the book of desire. You know, spoken, unspoken things maybe we thought we wanted when we were younger, but maybe we left behind, or we didn't, it was like in the back of our brain and we never really went there. And at one point, Bex, who is kind of a secondary character who also sets some things in motion in the novel, talks to Toby about things in life not being linear. Can you tell us about how you see linearity? Is that a word? I don't know.
Sure,
the linearness of life or lack thereof.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of lack of linearity in life. That was a tongue twister, wasn't it?
Yes, something else.
And I think it's something that, again, we need to be reminded of at this particular moment that my characters are in. They knew it as younger people, I think, in a way, right? When sort of like the whole world felt a little wilder and there were a bunch of directions to go in. And then it's just kind of like a bit of a narrowing. And it's not bad. It's just that Toby has forgotten that there are now other ways to go, other things that can happen. She's sort of just been on a path. She's gotten married, but not only that, she's had twin children, but also built a very successful business as an artisan. And so she has just been working and working. So she comes to this point where she needs to be reminded that it is not a road. And that it is time for her to sort of step off the road and back into the forest, essentially, which is where she came from, where we all did, right? And so, and so that's what Bex does, is kind of reminds her of that, which we all really do need to be reminded of. We don't have, it doesn't have to be a road. It's a road sometimes, and then you really do need to veer off and go somewhere else and come back, because there are many things. We have these unexpected desires, and we have to figure out what they are. You just have to. I mean, I think that there's really no other way to really be alive, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, indeed. Right?
Yeah, she does have to go, and she has to go and see what it's all about. And she's a little out of practice. And so that's what the book is about, her sort of getting back with the muscles of wanting things.
I love that idea of like getting back into the practice of the uncomfortability of not knowing where our life will take you. Because when you, like you said, like when you're 22 and you are young and foolish and you are used to it being unpredictable, you are used to like, oh, I'm going to choose this and who knows what will happen. But then you get to middle age and you are like, well, I have all these things that I wanted. And like, how do I get back in the practice of being uncomfortable?
Yes. And taking a risk and seeing if you could get it or not get it.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. The idea of like going back into the woods, get off the road. I love that analogy. I'm going to start using that. Thank you.
Okay, good. Send everyone into the woods.
Just go to the woods. Like I send the children, send the adults.
Send the children.
It's fine. You talked a little bit about Toby and Evie have this very successful bespoke pottery business. And I thought this was so interesting how their social media presence is kind of a theme in the book. This like appearance versus reality, and this idea of like parasocial relationships. And then you get to know the people that you like only know from their pretty, like beautifully soft hued Instagram photos. How did you come up with that idea, and how does it
I
weave into
mean,
the book?
it is. I think we all have our experiences of it, right?
Yes.
All of our particular, and what I love about it is that everyone's sort of parasocial relationships are so particular and
Oh
they're so
yeah.
varied because, of course, the internet is just infinite, right? So
You
you can
go
have
down
a
that
paras,
rabbit
you
hole.
can just go down any rabbit hole you want, and so I wanted to sort of explore the idea that actually you could have a parasocial relationship with somebody who owns a pottery company in
Mm-hmm.
your town. And it was just a lot of fun because I do think it is another piece of this looking out of middle age, right? It's another piece of this, what if I had made those choices kind of thing? And then we're just sort of
Mm.
seeing it play out. So Ruth, before she knows Toby and Evie, is just loves their social media, loves
Yep.
their pottery company, has bought tons of pottery, even though she doesn't like it. And she's just really, and interestingly, she's engaged with them because they sort of are playing out this sort of ideal lesbian couple. The
Right.
sort of like so much gender equity, thinking through everything, all of that stuff, so much equity in the marriage. And so it's fun to sort of, for when she starts to see that of course isn't actually true, but it is such a part of our lives, isn't it, that
Right.
we love the aesthetic. You find somebody where your aesthetics match, and then also you can aspire a little bit to what they have, and they make you a little uncomfortable and jealous. I mean, what? It's just a drug.
Oh, absolutely. And then you go down that rabbit hole, and then you like think you know these people, and then
Oh,
you're like,
totally.
oh
You're
no,
like, oh, I
absolutely
don't know
not.
these people. Yeah.
No.
So that was fun to explore.
Yeah. And then you kind of talked about it too in these parasocial relationships. And it's also present in the novel in friendships and in partnerships, this idea of envy. Envy
Yeah.
really plays a role in like family. Envy of your friends, the things they have that you don't have, the things that you think they have, because this is how it looks
Right.
like. Even though we're close friends, I don't live in your house.
Right.
And even this idea of envy and resentment of your partner. Like at one point,
Mm-hmm.
Caroline is like, says to her husband, like, you were supposed to be in charge of the child, but you were drinking and you were whatever, and I was going to be on him. And that envy of an idea of like that freedom that your spouse might have. Can you tell me how you see envy in the novel and again in midlife? We're just talking about all the
Yeah.
midlife things here.
We are. It was interesting, and I like that. I'm glad that you brought that up about sort of envy inside a marriage, because I also, Ruth, another character, has envy of her wife's ability to sort of know what she wants and make
Oh,
decisions,
absolutely.
and that also I think is, and she sees the way that she's sort of like pulled along because of these sort of like stronger forces of this person that she's married to. I think. Again, it just comes back to that idea of you think you can make things different, and that's sort of part of what jealousy and envy is. it's
Oh.
it's like, I think I could have done this thing and then I could be more like you. And
Hmm.
Fran Lebowitz,
Hmm.
the
Of
so she
course.
said something once about she said, you know what, it's perfectly fine to be jealous of someone and perfectly fine to be envious, so long as you are jealous of every single part of their lives.
Ah, there's an indictment
And
for you.
I heard her say that, I don't know, 5 years ago or something. And I have to say it cured me completely of my feelings of jealousy, because that really, the truth is, and that again, that comes back to what we were saying about what Jen Hatmaker had said to you, is that life's coming for everybody.
Amen.
And so the idea that you can be jealous of somebody, sure, but do you want their entire life? Do you
Right.
want everything about their existence? And I think that my characters are doing a bad job of following following Fran's advice. They're
Absolutely.
really still at that point of life where they're picking and choosing. Caroline is thinking, I wish I had Ruth's money. Ruth is thinking, I wish I had Wynn's ambition. Toby's
Yep.
thinking, I wish I had Bex's insight into their body at the time that, when they were young. And you just can't do that, unfortunately.
No, we don't get to pick and choose,
We don't get to
sadly.
pick and choose. We have to live by Fran's wise words.
That's so good. I have so many things I'm going to start using here, and this is excellent. So good. Um, I want to also discuss some ideas, and this kind of ties into that, how do we cure ourselves of envy, forgiveness, and grace for ourselves, for our younger selves, for our current selves, for the people in our lives. How do the characters integrate those ideas of forgiveness and grace to really blossom in middle age?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think that's maybe where my therapist character comes in for a couple
Mm-hmm.
of my characters, at least.
Yeah.
I think that there is a therapist character in this book. Caroline sees her. And I think I give her a lot of the wisdom that I'm hoping to impart in the book about
Yeah.
the power of forgiveness, and also the power of time,
Mm,
and the power of letting things go,
yeah.
and the power of letting, you know, this is where sort of also the familial relationship part comes in this idea of these people, if they really do want to live like family and be like family to each other, so much of that in a family, we let so many things go.
Mm,
And we show up at moments of tension. We kind of keep pushing through, and we don't always get into it.
mhm.
We have spats, or we have even larger arguments that we don't yet have the bravery to discuss, but we do sort of keep showing up. And I think that's what I wanted to show with my characters, that they could go a little bit down the road towards the forgiveness, but then when that's where the grace comes in, and that's where the ideas of we are going to live like family with each other, and so we're going to keep going, essentially, because
Yeah.
that's the way we've chosen to live our lives.
That is a perfect segue into what I wanted to ask you. What makes a family?
Oh gosh, what makes a family? Well, I mean, a lot of what I just said, I think. I
Mhm.
mean, I think people who are willing to show up for you, it would be terrible if I said when they don't want to. And I don't mean
No,
that at all.
absolutely no, but,
But
like, it's
I do kind
inconvenient,
of. Yeah.
hard,
Yes,
messy.
exactly. Exactly. People who, and, I think it's interesting because I think it's about love, and it's about loyalty, and it's about connections and all those things. But I also think it's about a certain level of obligation, and we use that word in a negative
Yeah.
way a lot of the time, but
Mhm.
it is not a bad thing to feel obligated to people. It is not a bad thing to have a soccer game that you don't want to go to, but your best friend would really love you to come and watch her son play soccer, because he is not a great soccer player and she
Yeah.
needs a little support, and he does too. And you could say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm busy," or whatever. But if that person is like your family, then you say, "Oh, I'll be there."
Mhm.
And I think that's a little bit, I think that essentially is what makes a family.
I love that. I love this idea of, like, do I want to? Well, not really, but I will be glad to have done it, and I
Yes,
would want someone to do it for me,
to
and
do
I
that
think,
for me.
in the year of our Lord 2025, where we're all, like, busy with, TikTok and Instagram therapy about, like, boundaries, and I'm not going and I'm not doing it. Here's a story and an idea of, like, it's gonna be inconvenient
Yeah,
and it's gonna be hard
totally.
sometimes,
Totally.
but that's what love is.
Totally. And I do feel like, I love that you brought up boundaries, because I do feel like my book is definitely an endorsement of living a boundary free life.
A little bit,
Fewer
right?
boundaries,
Right.
fewer boundaries in terms of just getting in
More
there with other
fluid
people. More fluid.
boundaries, more like give and take, it's not always
Exactly.
gonna be black and white.
it's
Right.
not always going to be clean, or it's not always going to be the thing you wanted to do, or it's not always going to feel relaxing, or it's not always going to feel fun. But it's
Good.
going to feel super joyful,
Right.
you
I
know?
love that. Yeah, absolutely. A joyful life is not always an easy or comfortable
It's
one.
not. No, that's very true. That's very
Um,
true.
is there anything else you want people to know about this novel that we haven't discussed yet?
I think the only thing it's been so fun, I should say, actually, to discuss
Good.
with this
I
with you. It's
agree.
just been great. And I think the only other thing I would want to say is that just a little thing about the name of the town, which is Radclyffe, New
Oh
York,
yeah.
which is a fictional name, and it's actually named that because of Radclyffe Hall, who was a an early writer of lesbian pulp fiction, which was pretty popular, like The Well of Loneliness and other rather tragic sort of early sapphic lesbian books. And I named the town that as an Easter egg, but also because my real goal for this book was to write a domestic queer novel that showed queer families living really big, expansive, joyful lives. And I wanted to just sort of offer that as something that doesn't always exist in literature, but I thought
Right.
would be a contribution. So that would be my contribution. So that's my just one little thing I wanted to
And
say.
that's exactly what it is. I
Thank
love
you,
that.
Brenda. Thank you.
So we are a bookstore. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you what you're currently reading and loving, or one of your all-time favorites. Let's talk about
Oh, I
books.
love that. I'm currently reading Wolf Bells by Leni
Ooh.
Zumas, which is absolutely gorgeous book. Leni wrote Red Clocks many,
Oh
many
yeah.
years ago. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And her new book is called Wolf Bells. And it's this gorgeous book about sort of an interconnected house of people caring for each other in a way that's just pretty beautiful.
I sense a
So
theme.
it's
I love it.
really worth picking up. It's a gorgeous book. And then I'm also reading The Rest of Our Lives by Ben Markovitz,
Oh
which is
yeah.
coming out soon,
Yeah.
which is also delightful. And I'm reading an ARE of Strangers by Belle Burden, who is
Oh.
it's a memoir that's coming out in January, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Story of a marriage, just a beautiful, beautiful book.
Oh, I'm going to add to my list.
Yes, please do. It's
Thank
beautiful.
you so much. Well, thank you for joining us today, Erin. I have truly enjoyed this conversation so
Oh, me too,
much.
Brenda.
Like Family is the Barnes & Noble November book club selection, and it's available in stores now. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you for listening. Poured Over is a Barnes & Noble production. To help other readers find us, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.